This is such an honor to be here, and to be able to be talking about the health aspects of relationships makes me super happy, because this is a huge passion and conviction of mine. And so thank you so much for the good work you're doing here and all around and doing all of this. I'm just so impressed, and I wish that all health professionals had that same foundation. And I picked up some health magazines at the airport last night when I flew in to look at what we're being told makes us healthy. Yes, skin flare-ups are solved, boys and girls. This is wonderful. You read this, and we can read how she got this sculpted, and top sports bras, good to know, and some sex tips. And then notice the word shrink is on almost every single one of these magazines. I find that, except, of course, the men's magazine, which has big is the thing. We want big on men, shrink on little. So it's interesting. You can go through and get all the magazines, and words keep repeating over and over on this one. Boost your testosterone instantly, get big muscles, secrets from the world's fittest men, do you drink too much? So good. Oh, this is interesting. Women's health. Most important things on the cover of Women's Health. Bold lips, chick nails, cool hair. You can get this and find out how to get hair tips for your health. Okay, great. And then I go to our good American doctor, Dr. Oz. Yes, the word shrink is on this one as well. And little sneaky germs we're talking about, and coffee. So I pick up these magazines that all claim to be talking about our health. There was nothing about relationships on any of these, unless you count sex tips on one of them, and on this one, how men are getting screwed with divorce because it's very expensive for them. Yes, so that's very interesting, isn't it? This is my life constantly. I talk to journalists. I call these magazines. 7 years ago, I went on a campaign starting to call the health reporters saying, we need to talk about friendship. And they said, oh, we covered that 2 years ago. Oh, and yet somehow getting flatter abs is something we can talk about every single month, right? But when it comes to our friendships, as long as we wrote one article 2 years ago, you're covered. This is Dr. Dean Ornish, a medical doctor and a clinical professor of medicine in San Francisco. And he's talking about love and intimacy. This is a really strong quote when it comes to love and intimacy, to back up what Dr. Shadle was saying. He says, I am not aware of any other factor in medicine, not diet, not smoking, not exercise, not stress, not genetics, not drugs, not surgery, that has a greater impact on our quality of life, incidence of illness, and premature death from all causes. Not too ambiguous there, was it? Yeah, and this gets backed up again and again and again. And it's really interesting. He talks about how he came out with a lot of books talking about this, but the reporters did not pick that up, and they ended up just picking up all the different things that he was saying about how diet can help and food can help. And so then he went and wrote an entire book on love and intimacy, because he said, we're not catching how significant this is to our health. And so tonight, I want to talk about how important this is to our health. And I really want to hit it hard before I teach what I think can help deepen the friendships and our relationships. And I'm talking about all relationships in general. All healthy relationships are good for our health. I feel like we live in a culture that is very obsessed with our romantic and our parenting relationships. And those are fine. I have chosen to speak in a space where I feel like it's being largely ignored, because I think these other relationships matter too. And so I'm going to be talking about platonic intimacy as well this evening, what I call frientimacy. I call it frientimacy because if I use the word intimacy, all your brains immediately think of what? Yes, they do. You know they do. It's like 7th grade sex ed class. And so I kind of tried to change that a couple years ago, where I kept trying to say, no, intimacy is more than that. And then I just kind of gave up because it wasn't working. And I said, okay, we're coining a new word so that you don't all think of sex and me having to keep trying to expand you. But the truth of the matter is we need far more intimacy than one relationship can fulfill, and certainly far more intimacy than one action in that relationship can fill. I was in New York City a few weeks ago, or just a few days ago, I'm like, not even know what city I'm in, for a book event, and in the hotel room where they have the drinks and the food that you can kind of purchase and will end up on your bill, they had something called the intimacy kit. Yeah, I mean, I'm somebody who loves intimacy. 2 condoms and some lube. I was like, no, that's not intimacy, that's sex. And sex can be part of intimacy, but that is not intimacy. Intimacy is much bigger than that. And so when we're talking about intimacy tonight, we're talking about all forms of loving, healthy relationships. And I really want to make a point. I'm so grateful for the men in the audience. I feel like this is even most important for the men. I have been on a campaign for many, many years for women, and I am feeling more and more convicted about speaking on behalf of men's intimacy. Men, white, heterosexual American men, are some of the loneliest people in the entire world. We have not given men good permission for intimacy outside of romance. We have not modeled it well. We have not encouraged it. There's a lot of shame around awkwardness and embarrassment for men to want that or to figure out how to develop that. I have a theory that this is why men often remarry sooner after death and divorce, is because the only place we've told them it's okay to experience vulnerable intimacy is in romantic relationships. So I'm really grateful for all the men in the audience, and I just want to speak that I'm talking about intimacy for all of us. Feeling seen for all of us, I think really, really matters. So that's a pretty powerful quote, and we can talk some more about some of the research. So, how many of you are lonely? Oh, some brave souls. Well done. Ladies and gentlemen, the ones who raise their hand are emotionally intelligent human beings. That's very impressive. Emotional intelligence means we can actually identify what we're feeling and name it so that we can then do something about it. If we are refusing to name that, then we're less likely to do something about it, right? So if I feel that twinge of loneliness and I have any stigma around it, I'm more likely to be like, no, I'm not lonely. I mean, people like me. I've got good friends. I mean, call my friends. I look at my list of friends on my phone. I can't be lonely, right? And how many of us work with people all day long? Anybody? Anybody exhausted by people at the end of the day? Yeah. And so we can't be lonely, right? If given the choice between a quiet night at home or going out with somebody, how many of us would choose the quiet night at home? Yeah. So it's very deceiving when we feel that twinge of loneliness. We sometimes will sit there and say, that's crazy. I can't be lonely. I've got a lot of friends. And yet the fact is, most of us are experiencing unacknowledged loneliness. I actually believe we have an epidemic of unacknowledged loneliness. And I think it's deadly. I think it's incredibly dangerous to not be acknowledging it. It's because when we're not acknowledging it, we're not prone to then make the decisions and change our behavior in order to get those needs met. And so tonight I just want to highlight and really help take some of the shame and the stigma away from the loneliness. I really want to be able to have more of you raise your hand when I say how many of you are lonely. It's not my goal to make you all lonely, but it's certainly my goal to help you be aware of it, because many of us are feeling this loneliness. In fact, before I give some statistics, I want you to just check in with yourself for a second and ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, if I were to ask you how fulfilling your friendships are, how meaningful, how intimate, how satisfying, how rewarding, how vulnerable, how deep, with 10 being the deepest of all of those things. If I were to ask you, how fulfilling and satisfied are you with your friendships on a scale of 1 to 10? So quantity of them, quality of them, the support of them, the vulnerability of them. What number, and you don't have to say it out loud, what number would you rank and assess your friendships? How many of you said 10? 1. Okay, good. Excellent. So here's the statistics of 1,200 women, and I'm going to do this survey with men this spring. With 1,200 women, on a scale of 1 to 10, women were twice as likely to list a 1 or a 2 as they were to list a 9 or a 10. 50% of us are 5 below, and about 70% of us are 7 or below. So that means 3 out of every 4 of us sitting in this room, if you're statistically part of this average, would say that we have a gap between where we're at and where we want to be, the depth that we can imagine for our relationships. And so 3 out of 4 of us are expressing some dissatisfaction on some level. And so if I were to ask you a different question instead of how many of you are lonely, If I were to say, how many of you wish you had deeper relationships? How many of you would raise your hand? Absolutely. And to recognize that that is a form of loneliness, and that that doesn't mean something bad, it means something good. What if loneliness were your body saying, I want more love. I want more connection. What if there was no shame associated with it, but simply interesting? Wow, I've got more love to give. I have more of me that wants to be seen in this world. What if that's what the message was trying to tell you? What if it's just information in your body? The same way hunger pangs tell you to eat. It's not telling you you're a bad person because you're hungry. It's not telling you you've never eaten or that you're not doing a good job eating. I get hungry every 4 hours, no matter what I ate and how I ate. And so it's important to realize that the loneliness is simply our body's way of saying, you have room for more connection in your life. How would that feel? If I were to say, how many of you have experienced loneliness recently? Which only was if I phrased it different and say, how many of you wish that you recognize that you have room for experiencing more love in this world? Doesn't that feel entirely different? Yeah, totally. And that's what we've got to be stepping into. Because to not be acknowledging this is fatal, truly fatal. It's like walking around undiagnosed. It's like walking around unaware, being somebody who's refusing to go to the healthcare system because you don't want to know what's happening, right? And so denial keeps many of us away. Fear keeps many of us away. Shame keeps many of us away. And loneliness, some of the research is staggering. They're saying that when asked the question, do you feel supported? If your answer is no, you have a 3 to 5 times higher risk of dying in the next 10 years is when they were doing the study there. And that's dying of all kinds of things. That's dying from heart attacks, stroke, cancer, suicide. I mean, across the board. One of the biggest studies is Brigham Young did a study, and they pulled, I think, 150 longitudinal studies, which is all these previous studies that were done, and compiled them to look at the trends of all these studies. So massive, massive study of all the research that had been done up to that point, and concurred from that if you feel disconnected, it is as damaging to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It is twice as harmful as being obese, and is the equivalent damage we're talking real damage, the equivalent of being a lifelong alcoholic. One doctor went on record and said, if I had a patient who was smoking and lonely, and I had to pick which one they needed to focus on, I would say go make friends. That will do more for your health. One of the studies was showing that if we actually choose all the healthy behaviors and feel lonely, we are at greater risk than if we do all the unhealthy behaviors and feel loved and supported in life. Of course, it's better to be both, right? So I'm not advocating not those. I'm trying to swing the pendulum to remind us this is not a foo-foo subject. This is not if you have extra time in your life, you should go out for girls' night. Or, hey, boys, go get a golf game in. This isn't just kind of this encouragement to go have a social life. This is saying this is one of the most important health subjects of our time. It is not something that you can decide once the kids are grown, I'll focus on that. This is something that matters so much to our health. To put it up there in the same category as smoking and alcohol disease and all these things that we've given so much attention to is kind of shocking, isn't it? Because we have billboards that sit there and show us this is what your lungs look like here, and this is what they look like here. We have government laws that tell us you can't smoke in these places. We have all this government regulation around all of this, right? We have campaigns for losing weight. And all of these are really important. But when was the last time we are talking about love and intimacy mattering to your health as much as these things? We live in a world that is increasingly fragmented. Very few of us live in the same community where we grew up. Very few of us feel like we are in deep, intimate, vulnerable marriages. The numbers are decreasing of how many of us feel like we're part of have a net underneath us and a part of a tribe, part of a community. And all of these things are having an unraveling effect that you can see in this world, can't you? When we feel lonelier, we're more likely to attack, We're more likely to devalue. We're more likely to make nasty comments online. We're more likely to inappropriately be vulnerable. If we aren't connected in meaningful ways to good people, then when we feel a need to be seen and show up in this world, we vomit on people. Any nice person, we're just likely to overdo it. We're showing up and we don't feel this love and this concern. In fact, I believe we live in a world that is increasingly networked and yet increasingly without a net underneath us. I think we know more people than we've ever known. I mean, the number of faces and people that I try to keep track in my head these days. I mean, it used to be you lived in a small community and you kind of needed to know this. Now we know more people than we've ever known, and yet we feel increasingly unknown. We are just so out there wanting to be seen, but we're not going and showing up and really showing ourselves and really being vulnerable. And so we live in a world where we're kind of this unacknowledgement of our loneliness is costing us. And so I need you to be advocates. I need you to be people who are able to say, yeah, I do feel loneliness. And I'm going to trust that as I say that, my body and my brain are going to start leaning me into doing something about it. It's called dissonance. Dissonance is recognizing the difference in a gap. Dissonance is saying, I named my number, and whatever number you named, there is no shame in that number. The number you named is your truth for this moment, and that now the invitation is to say, what can I start doing to close that gap? And we all have to have that dissonance before we bring life change. We don't cut up the credit cards until we have that moment of dissonance, like I am in debt. We don't quit our job until we have that dissonance. We don't go on a diet. All those things in our life, the big changes, we have to feel that gap between where we're at and where we want to be before we're willing to make that change. And so emotional intelligence, our EQ, dictates that we have to be able to ID the right feeling. And in this case, loneliness is an accurate feeling so that we can then move ourselves back to a place of peace. We can't do that if we aren't doing that. And so we have to name that feeling. So today I want to share a few things with you that can help us move that. And I want to put most of the focus on one of those particularly. And before we do that, I want to highlight the loneliness so that we can start kind of seeing where we're each at on this loneliness in a little bit of a different way. I highlighted on that scale of 1 to 10 that for many of us, our loneliness is coming from wanting deeper friendships. That means a lot of us know enough people. A lot of us, it's not from lack of having a social life or being able to name people or being friendly with people that's hurting us. It's not being deep enough to a few of those people that's hurting us, right? And I see a lot of heads nodding on that. So for some of us, it's a lack of deeper friends, and that number may have connected us to that. In my first book, Friendships Don't Just Happen, it's a book about how to make friends as an adult. And I talk about these 4 types of loneliness. Another one of the types of loneliness is that some of us need to meet new people. Some of us, we don't know enough people. Some of us actually need to meet new people. And so can you see, even between those 2 different types of loneliness, the strategy would be very different, wouldn't it? If you're new to an area, or people have moved away, or you've been so focused on your kids or career that you haven't been building those relationships, or whatever the case may be, there's no shame. But for some of us, when we think, who are my friends, we simply haven't gone out and met enough people. So for some of us, our invitation to build intimacy would need to be meeting new people, which is very different than the people who know a ton of people, and their loneliness is coming from not feeling close enough to a few, right? So important to differentiate. A third type of loneliness that's very common is, I'm going to use the word more friends. For some of us, we might have that one really close friend. Sometimes it's a spouse. Research is showing that actually only about a quarter of us are actually articulating that we feel like we have one person in this world that we can confide in, which is really, really painful to me. that we feel like we can really trust and confide in. The numbers are really staggering, and the numbers have been dropping. That percentage has been dropping. It used to be that more of us were reporting having 2 people, and those numbers are dropping. But for some of us, we have that one person, whether it's a sister, whether it's a life, friend, whether it's that person at work. We feel like we have the one. But our loneliness is coming from recognizing that that one person can't fill all of our intimacy needs. And so our loneliness isn't that our friend is inadequate. It's not saying that that's not a good friendship. It's acknowledging that we can't get all our needs met by that one person and that we need to bring more people into our lives in deeper ways, which can be tricky because if Kim and I are super close and I need to make new friends and I go out with somebody else, I would be tempted to judge them against Kim, right? And so we go, oh, that was exhausting. It's so much easier just to share with so-and-so. And so it's very hard for us sometimes to put ourselves in a place where we are, building up some more of those friendships. If you feel resentful towards somebody else for not being there for you, that is not a sign that they aren't being there for you most of the time. It's often an invitation to you that you need to develop more friendships in your life. That one person can't be all of that, and even if they try and want to be, you're very vulnerable. With the amount of moves we're making, fights that can happen, death, loss, people not loving us back all the time, even just good intentions. I mean, I'm on book tour for almost a month. If my best friend in San Francisco, if I was all she had, she's vulnerable because I am not available at a high level of connection right now, right? If she's sick, I'm not there. Praise God, my friends have good friends. I'm so grateful. I am one of several for them. I'm so grateful that I know they're taken care of. There's a tribe around them. And so for some of us, we have ailing parents we have to go take care of. We go through health crisis where we're just not as available. We have kids. We get caught up in our weddings. We have all kinds of things that sometimes makes us a little less available. And instead of resenting that person for being unavailable, it is not their job to be there for us at all times. It's our responsibility to make sure we have the circle of friends that at any given moment, I know that I have somebody. And if she's not available, okay, I got somebody. So for some of us, the invitation to loneliness isn't that we don't have somebody. This is not a judgment that that person's not adequate, but it's an invitation to us that we need to say, I need to build some backup. I need to make sure I have that second and third person. So for some of us, that might be our area of loneliness. And the last one that I think is really important to point out is that for some of us, we need specific friends. A good example of this would be maybe we feel like we have good friends, maybe we feel like we have that close friend, maybe we feel like we know enough people, but we are diagnosed with cancer, and none of our close friends have had that experience. We feel like we want other people who know that experience, right? You have that desire to have somebody who gets it. Or you're a parent of a special needs child, or you are going through a divorce late in life, or you're a widow young, and whatever the case may be, we sometimes have experiences in our life. Maybe we're brand new converted to a certain religious experience, or a passion or an interest about something that's not being tapped into. It can be just something simply like, I love going to plays and I haven't been to one, I have no one to go with, And so whatever the case may be, sometimes our loneliness comes from saying, I wish I had a friend who shared this commonality with me. And sometimes our hunger comes from wanting somebody who shares an experience with us. And so it could be surprising to us because we can say, why am I feeling lonely? I have great friends. I talk to so-and-so. And it might be that our inquiry isn't, again, that we don't have enough friends or even deep friends. It's that there's a part of our life that's not being seen, not being shared, not being connected to somebody else. Does that make sense? So before we go on, because we are talking about connection, I am actually going to make you connect with each other. And so I'm going to ask you for 3 minutes to share with one person, introduce yourself, say your name, and share with them which one of these is the area that if you were to say is kind of expresses your current loneliness or recent loneliness, which one do you say would be the one that you feel is more apropos to your life experience right now? Do you feel like you know a ton of people, but you actually want to feel deeper by a few? Do you actually feel like, honestly, I probably don't even know enough people, I probably need to meet more people? Is it that you have one great friend, but you kind of know you're vulnerable and you feel like you need a little bit more in there with you? Or is it that you actually know quite a few people? And I really want to give a cautionary to this because we all think we want our twin. And this one is not the one where you're like, yeah, I want that one. I want someone who likes everything I like. This one speaks more to it acknowledges that you're wanting one thing in common. So let's go back to the example of being diagnosed with cancer. That means I want to share that experience with someone. That means I am not going to be upset that they're a different age, that they're a different political background, that they're I don't need them to be my twin. I don't need them to be a mom of 2 kids at the same age as I'm a mom with 2 kids. It means I'm looking for this specific thing. So this you don't get to pick that one and be like, yeah, I want to find my twin who's my best friend. This is a certain specific experience that you wish that you had more of. So introduce yourself to one person and just share your name. And then just for 90 seconds per person, just share which one resonates with you or has been the most, resonated with you recently or in your life. And what does that kind of look like on you right now? And so then you'll just do 90 seconds apiece. I'll kind of give you a halfway point to switch and go ahead and find somebody to connect with. By show of hands, how many of you chose this option, deeper friends? 6 or 7, okay. How many of you said new people? I need to make new friends. Okay, good, okay. How many of you said more friends? Good, okay, that one's winning at the moment, interesting. Okay, specific friends. Oh, yeah, that's a good one, good. Did anybody's answer surprise them or kind of be an aha for them or anything? Any experiences anyone wants to share as they were kind of processing it or listening? Before we go on.
I never thought of that category until you mentioned it.
Which one?
The specific friends, number 4.
Yeah.
So that surprised me, but it immediately pointed to a loss, a friend who moved away. Really, we had amazing conversation.
Yeah. Of course, that's a big loss.
So maybe, and it might not be that same particular specific. It could be in music or somewhere else where someone would have that meaningful connection.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, it reminds me of one of my girlfriends, and I have her permission to tell this story. It's in my first book. It's interesting because we have a Tuesday night girls group, and we get together every week for Tuesday nights, about 5 of us. And then she was the first one of that group to have a baby at the time. And she started feeling kind of guilty for talking about the baby and feeling kind of like it was, and just that, none of it, we could all empathize. But when she was talking about, cracked nipples, we were like, I don't know what to do to help you. And so we love you, but I don't know, So I said to her, you really should go join a mother's group. This would be so great. And she's like, but I love all my friends. I love you guys. And I said, well, you're not replacing us. You're not going and just getting rid of us and going and, finding new friends. You're not looking for new friends. You're looking for specific friends, friends who understand that experience. The rest of us are still here on Tuesday nights to hold your heart, but you need that. And so she joined a mother's group, and 2 months later, I said, how is the mom's group going? And she goes, all they talk about are babies. They don't even know who I am other than Lily's mom. They don't even know about the rest of my life. We can't even have, it's all we're doing is talk about potty training and sleep techniques. And, and she's like, oh, and I had to say, but that's what you needed. That's all you needed them for. You have us for all those other things. You don't need every friend to fit everything. It's not all or nothing. It's not that we need all friends to be all things. It's that we're here to hold your heart and to hold all those other things and empathize. You needed them to talk about that. And chances are high that if you continue with that, some of those will turn into deeper friends. But you can't walk into that group and be mad at them for not acting like best friends. And you can't be mad at best friends for not acting like specific friends of what you needed, right? And so it's starting to understand they all play different roles. And so certainly that specific friends, having a certain thing that we can connect on matters so much. So I want to share with you what we can do to start new friendships, deepen them, make sure that we're continuing to invite more people on that, and make sure that we are understanding what a friendship is and how to get it. How does that sound? So my second book that just came out is Friendtimacy, and it's about what it takes to actually define and be a friendship. If I were to ask you what a friendship is, how would you answer that question? Someone who's there for you. Yep. That's
Someone to do things with.
someone to do things with. Yep. So activities, doing things with you. Yep. Good. A loving connection between two people. So all of those are really beautiful things. And I have found that for most of us, we have this kind of grocery list of what we want in a friend. And we have feelings that we associate that we can kind of say, like, be there for me, like this thing, but it can be kind of ambiguous and kind of hard to measure and kind of hard to know what there means and where there is and how often there needs to be. And so I've found that when it comes to friendship, actually having a working definition, and this is true of all healthy relationships, but speaking of friendships particularly tonight, I think it's really important to have a definition that we can then work off of. So the definition of a friendship is where two people are in a satisfying relationship where it feels safe and they feel seen. That is the definition of a friendship. The actions of how to get there, I want to kind of go over just briefly. We're not going to have time to unpack it. I do a chapter in my book on every single one of these and talk about it more. But I want you to be able to see what this actually looks like and how to do it. Because this definition tells you how to start any friendship, how to deepen any friendship, how to repair any friendship, and how to call it quits when you just go, this is not a friendship, and it's time we acknowledge that. And so this definition gives you a chance to measure and assess your relationships at any given time. I will guarantee you by the end of this evening, and I'll make the statement now, any friendship or relationship that is not feeling fulfilling and meaningful in your life right now, it is because one of these three, at least one of these three, is in lack. And so let's look at how to build these three things. Satisfying. And we talked about this a little bit with a group at lunch today. How many of you woke up this morning and said, I wish I just had a few more needy, whiny, complaining people who I just never feel like I'm doing enough for them, and there's just a lot of guilt, and I just feel like I'm not good enough for them. Any takers? Any of you woke up this morning? How many of you woke up this morning and said, it's been at least 2 days since somebody's cried on my shoulder. It's kind of lonely. I wish somebody would just come and just really whine and cry and need me. Anyone? Any takers? Yeah. Isn't it funny when we think about friendship, we want somebody whose shoulder we can cry on. But when we think about wanting a friendship, how many of us are like, I wish somebody else were crying on my shoulder? The truth of the matter is, we want friendships that are satisfying. There has to be more reward than pain. And that's true of all healthy relationships. We choose our friends. We get to go in and build relationships that pay off for us, that have a reward center. The studies around relationships actually show that being in an unhealthy relationship is more damaging to your health than being in a no relationship. When it comes to marriage, that's most of the studies around that are marriage. That if you are in a relationship where you've been long time married and it has a lot of nagging and bickering, it is more damaging to your health than being single. Being in a relationship that does not have a reward and does not feel satisfying ends up leaving us very painful. One of the big studies of men, particularly in a marriage, was asked, does your wife show you her love? If they answer, there's 4 choices, high to low, and if they answered low, they were 2 times more likely to get ulcers than people who answered high. If they answered no, they were 3 times more likely to get ulcers. In another study where they were talking about children and parents, these children, and they actually did it in college, they asked all these students to rate how much love they perceived their parents to give them growing up. And it was chosen between high to low. So this is not actually measuring the love, it's measuring their perception of how warm and loving their relationships were. They followed up with all those students 30 years later when those college students were in midlife. And if they had rated low perception of love when they were in college, they were twice as likely to have been diagnosed with a disease in midlife than had they rated high. So our perception of this need for satisfying is incredibly important. We're not just talking you just need to be connected to people. Although some studies do show the quantity, just knowing that there's people you could call there is some value. And so it's hard with all these, they measure different things. But we all will agree, if we can have both, them there and it being good, let's go that route. So the way we build satisfying relationships is we have to have positivity. Positivity, I will just say, that includes things like laughter. Are you familiar with love languages? It includes like acts of service, a touch, words of affirmation, quality time. It includes moments of laughter and memory making. So all those things that kind of have a payoff for us on the positivity scale. And I just want to comment on this because I don't want to not say it. We can unpack it more, but I just want to point out it has to be 5-to-1. I think that's important to point out. 5-to-1 positivity to negativity. So we're not saying you can't have negativity in the relationship. Every relationship has stress. We're not saying be Pollyanna and don't talk about negative stuff. We're saying that you have to make 5 deposits to make 1 withdrawal. So you get to go through life and say, I am going to add positivity to my relationships in order so that at the times where I am kind of a pain in the neck, and those times where life is stressful, and those times I am in crisis, and those times I do need a shoulder to cry on, I am being mindful that even in those moments, I can be affirming, I can be grateful, I can ask about their life, I can thank them, I can do things that add positivity into that. Does that make sense? How many of you want to be in relationships that have that ratio, 5-to-1? Good, okay. The second one, so that's how we build satisfying relationships. In order for us to build safe relationships, we have to have consistency. Consistency is what we build with people as we go up the triangle. Regularity, history, frequency, showing up, consistency, like being the same person so that we don't feel like we're walking on eggshells. This is how trust gets built, is as we do this frequently together. If I just meet one of you tonight and think you're fabulous, but we never see each other again, are we friends? No, we have to do it again and again and again. We're not friends. We were people who were friendly to each other. Very big difference between people we're friendly with, which I hope is everybody, and people we are developing a friendship with. Friendship gets developed with that consistency. Many of you said doing activities together, building trust. This is how this one gets developed. And the last one is vulnerability. Vulnerability is how we bond with each other. It's how we feel seen with each other. It's the deep conversations. It's the editing ourselves less. I use the word filtering myself less. You know, where you, in a certain groups, you're just kind of like, how will that come across? How will they think that? And the closer you are to somebody, you're just like, even if I say it wrong, I've got enough trust with them and enough history that we will figure it out and we will I don't have to be filtering like, how are they reacting to this? We've been there. And so we are increasing how we're sharing, what we're sharing. I do want to point out on the vulnerability, there's been a lot of press around vulnerability being talking about the painful stuff, kind of parading our skeletons and our shame and our insecurity, which is a important part. Being vulnerable also means talking about our amazingness and celebrating who we are and bragging about our friends and showing like being proud of healthy marriages, not feeling shame for being successful, not feeling like we have to hide our money, not feeling like a lot of friendships, actually people feel like they have to like shrink in order to not make other people feel bad about their lives. And that's not healthy friendship. That's not vulnerability. So we need to be in friendships where we can celebrate what's going well and hold the space for what's not going well. We need to be able to do both. There's a whole bunch, there's 5 different areas of vulnerability about owning what we need and speaking it from a place of self-worth, being able to increase how we're communicating, what topics. If you bond with somebody over work, it's vulnerable to broach another subject and to talk about other things that builds your vulnerability with it. Doing new activities together. If you're only friends at church, doing stuff outside of church is vulnerability, making that initiation. If you're only friends at work, the first time you're saying, hey, we should get together with our spouses and do something outside is vulnerability. So we're always trying to increase the life and the way we're being seen and showing more of our life and having that overlap with each other. Does that make sense? So all 3 of these are requirements. I will repeat my guarantee. There is not a relationship in your life that is healthy and feels good that doesn't have all three of these, and any relationship that feels like it's not working well right now, you now have information on saying, oh, we have so much fun together all the time. We go out and we go golfing, we play racquetball, we go shopping, we have so much fun. But if you don't have the vulnerability, it's just a social life. It's somebody you do activities with, right? So you know that if you want frientimacy, you have to figure out how to increase this one. If you have positivity and vulnerability without this one, if I sit down with Steve and we have a great time, we both feel affirmed, we feel seen, it's positive, and we both really share ourselves, but we never do it again, it's not frientimacy. And so we know that that's the one that we have to see each other more often in order to create that frientimacy. If we have consistency and vulnerability without positivity, God help us all, if we're getting together with somebody all the time and just being really vulnerable, but we all both go home exhausted and weary and drained every time, that is not a friendship. So we start having information that says we have to have all three. We can't be the friendship for both people, but we most certainly can show up and inspire and do actions that invite and invoke these three things in every friendship and relationship in our life. So I'm going to ask you to share one more time with a partner. I want you to get with somebody different, introduce yourself, and share with them which of these three actions do you think if you intentionally increased in your relationships, it would make the biggest difference. Another way of asking that is which one is in lowest supply in your relationships? Which one feels like you would say, oh, I think my friendships would be more meaningful if we did a little bit more of that one? Which one do you crave having added to your relationships? So introduce yourself to one more person and just share your name and just in 1 minute share each and share with each other which one you think would make the biggest difference to you developing satisfying relationships where you feel safe and seen. Love it. So my invitation to you tonight, when I think about what I want for you, is I want for you, it's not about putting carrots in front of you of a certain number of relationships. You don't have to fit my criteria. We went and had that number. And whatever number you gave yourself, I want for you that you have the information that says, I know how I can start to push that number deeper. I know what it will take. It may not be easy, but I know the actions I can take. A friendship is not just luck. It is not just, I hope I meet the right person. You are not lonely because you haven't met the right people. We are lonely because we haven't developed the right relationships with the people that we're meeting. It has less to do with the people. You could meet me and think I'm not a great friend because I'm not doing all three of those things with you. And that is not true. It just means I'm doing that with somebody else, right? So it has less to do with the person not being the right person. It has more to do with what two people are practicing with each other. A friendship is not how much you like someone. It's how much you are practicing those three actions with someone. And that's what we want to develop. And so I want to end with a story of, I was on book tour and I was in a bookstore and my audience was primarily women. And so it was a lot of estrogen in the room. But there was a man standing in the bookshelves right over here. And he was very much attending and listening, but he didn't want anyone to know. So he was kind of standing there doing this, like, look at the book, listen and look at me. And nobody could kind of see him, but he was attending without attending. And I was very aware of him. And all the women came up and got their books signed and asking questions. And it took a good 15, 20 minutes. And they left, and he was still looking at the same history books. And he came over to me kind of sheepishly and very awkwardly. Can I talk to you? I said, of course. If you had asked me 2 months ago if I had good friends in my life, I would have said yes. I would have told you about the guys that I play poker with every month. Same guys for a long time. I would have told you about the foursome that golfs almost every single week. I would have told you how I am still in touch with all my high school friends, like my good buddies, 20 years later. He said, I think I do friendship probably better than any guy I know. He goes, if you had asked me if I had good friends, I would have said yes. My wife was diagnosed with cancer last month. And I don't know who to talk to. And he said, I don't know if I have good friends. And as soon as he said that, he said, I mean, oh, the guys would feel awful if they heard me say this. I mean, they would want to be there for me. But he said, it's poker night. I mean, we're there to have fun and laugh. Like, I'm not going to drop this on them, you know? And I mean, we're golfing. Like, how much conversation can you have in the 5 minutes where you're standing there and supposed to be quiet, and then you get in the cart and, you know, he's just like, And he goes, I would give anything to have friendships the way women do it. And I think that's a stereotype. I think not all women do that, and some men do that very well. I think what he was trying to say is the idea, he said, I wish one of these guys, they would just take me out to dinner and we could just talk late into the night. I wish one of these guys would just be a safe place for me to like talk about how scared I am. And he said, it's not that I don't think they couldn't, it's that we've never practiced it. I listened to you talking about practicing these 3 actions. And he said, it's awkward. We have not done that before. I don't know how to ask for help. I don't know how to do this. And so we sat down and had a really great long conversation. I think most of us can relate to that. Our circumstances might look different. I think most of us know that feeling where we can say, yes, I've got friends. Do you feel supported? Do you have the intimacy that you know you can step into at any time because you've practiced it? Not because you just hope when it's big time they're there for you. Because it's easy in theory to say, oh, I know she'd be there for me. It's easy in theory, but when that happens, if we aren't practiced at reaching out and asking for help and sharing, that's a pretty mighty big step to take, with neither of us knowing how to do that with each other. My prayer for you is that you don't wait until that moment. And some of us are in that moment, and some of us have been in that moment recently. But wherever we are, my prayer is that you start where you are and say, I am going to start doing these 3 actions to deepen a couple of the relationships in my life. Not just so that I'm supported in crisis, not just because I'm going to be happier, which you will be, we report being happier, not just because it will prevent ulcers, not just because I will recover from surgery faster, which is true, not just because I will live longer, all these reasons, but because my body was made for love and intimacy, and I know I do better across the board when I'm connected to others. That is my prayer for you, that you don't leave here just hoping it happens, but that you leave here saying, I am going to do whatever I can to make that happen. It was such a blessing being with you tonight. I hope you see the value this is to your health. It's as significant as going to the gym or more so. Please reach out for love. May your heart be filled with so much love. And thank you so much for having me. Blessings on all of you.
Pathways to Health and Wellness is sponsored by Centura Health.